Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining this webinar on the evolution of computing. We've got four distinguished speakers, plus our moderator, Claire Vishik, who is a TDL strategic advisor. This webinar is due to last 1 hour. During that time, attendees are welcome to ask questions through the chat, which will be taken to Claire, who will distribute them as appropriate. So with that brief introduction, I should also say that this session is being recorded, and a recording of the session will be made available, as well as a summary report shortly afterwards within the next few days. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Claire.
Thank you very much, David, for this introduction. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that intrigued me for a long time. Having worked in security for decades and both in hardware and software security, and to some extent for 5 years in the middle on network security as well. It was fascinating for me to see how progress in security technologies happened based on the general trends in computing. This is sort of self-evident. But it was also even more fascinating for me to see the trends in security, trust, and privacy technologies influencing the general purpose security architectures, system architectures, and so on. A most representative example that comes to mind is trusted computing and TPM. That was influenced by the perceptions, both societal and regulatory and related computing technology perceptions of what should be in a trusted computing element. As a result, and this is typical for hardware and to some extent to software in general, about 1/3 of non-volatile memory of the early trusted platform module was taken up by the implementation of direct anonymous attestation, a privacy protection mechanism. This privacy protection mechanism was considered very important, but it was never used in practice. It was a fascinating intellectual exercise that influenced the technology direction. It was not foundational to the use of the trusted platform module. There are several examples that probably both the participants and the listeners of this webcast know that are similar. And this is what I would like to focus on today. The feedback mechanism from how security, trust, privacy features are implemented into the general architectures of general purpose systems. I will give very brief introductions of the distinguished panelists. You could read their full biographies on the website. I can say that all four and their work have influenced a lot of areas where I was working and my own work in the past. It's my pleasure to introduce Elisa Bertino, who is a professor of computer science and also research director at CERIAS in Purdue. Dominic Forte, who is a professor and Stephen Yatoro faculty fellow at ECE Florida, and he is also associate director of Florida Institute for National Security, FINS. Sandeep Rai, who is Warren Helms Endowed Professor at the University of Florida, and Stephen Murdoch, who is a a professor of security engineering and head of information security research group at the University College London. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to start this discussion by asking you to express your view on how this feedback mechanism from the achievements of security, trust, privacy technologies into the general technologies and architectures revealed itself in the area where you are working. And we'll go in alphabetical order for this one. Elisa, would you like to start, please?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So I have been in security for 40 years and I have seen so many technologies, but I feel that many technologies for security and privacy, and those include, of course, cryptographic techniques, but homomorphic encryptions, secure multi-party computation. There are a lot of them, and many of them are actually applied. And today, there is a lot of, really real application that are becoming more efficient because of hardware also enhancement, which means certain algorithms, which are very expensive, today can be executed very quickly. So, and somehow a very important result was that at least there's been a large awareness of security, okay? So 40 years ago, the idea that you needed to have a zero trust architecture was not there. So you put a firewall around, and that's what you have done with security. Now, the real problem that I see, and so we keep progressing with this. Again, the new things will be all the area of quantum, cryptography, post-quantum cryptography, and so forth. There is a lot of research, and companies are really interested. Now, whether those will be integrated in the architecture or how, I mean, we could discuss, but certainly there is a lot of interest. The real problem, though, that integrating this technology is very complicated because it depends not only on the architecture, but the application domain. If you do technology, for example, for financial domain, and then may not apply directly to another domain. And finally, and I'll stop, the main problem in my view is that managing security is complicated. Configuring all the security mechanism, that's where sometimes you have a lot of attacks, not for the lack of good technology.
Thank you very much. It's impossible to disagree with any of the positions you stated. Thank you. Dominic, what is your view on the subject?
Sure. So my area is a little bit more narrow. I'm working in the area of hardware and supply chain security. So I chose a more narrow example, which is the physically unclonable function, or PUF. So PUFs are these hardware fingerprints that you initially saw in academic papers and specialized hardware defenses to basically replace keys that were stored in non-volatile memories and fuses. And they're now being implemented by a lot of leading vendors at Intel, AMD, and Xilinx, and so forth, from everything from FPGAs to microcontrollers and even mobile devices today. But that being said, there are challenges associated generally with PUFs. Mainly their reliability. They're very sensitive to noise and environmental changes, meaning that you need error correction, which means that you also need non-volatile memory, which partially offsets their advantage. And the error correction also reduces the amount of usable entropy derived from the PUF itself, and that potentially impacts the cryptographic strength. So there's a lot of trade-offs here between managing the security of PUFs and the silicon area that's required. And there has been at least some efforts towards standardization, which is a great step in this type of technology. So one example is the ISO IEC 20897, and this is vital for creating a common benchmark for vendors to sort of follow. But overall, I think the general adoption of PUFs is meaningfully enhancing security, privacy, and trust. Again, like for example, Xilinx is using that to create these private keys rather than storing them and driving them on the fly. And Intel is adopting puffs to support a lot of things like TPM, security enclaves, device binding, and platform attestation, and these kinds of things. So I think that's one example that I can give of technology that we've developed that has come out of my area and is very valuable.
Thank you, Dominic. And I will certainly have a couple of follow-up questions for you and for Elisa. Stephen, what is your view on the subject? How does it reveal it?
Yeah, I'd probably go for, in terms of area that I'm interested in, just end-to-end encryption. That used to be a technology that was reserved for national security purposes. It was reserved for the most highly sought after secrets that companies would be using, but now it is the standard. So it's in all the major chat products. It's in web browsing. It probably HTTP is going to be disabled soon. So I think end-to-end encryption has succeeded, and where I hope the next technology will be following that route is on more advanced cryptography, specifically around privacy-enhancing technologies. So zero knowledge, homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation. We're already seeing that having some role in finance when it's related to blockchain, but I think that's just one of the few areas where it could be applied. So I think end-to-end encryption has succeeded, and I hope privacy-enhancing technologies are going to follow. In terms of how that's going to change things, well, what cryptography does is, of course, it protects security and it protects privacy, but what I think it really achieves is moving around trust. So end-to-end encryption allows you to trust that you're talking to the right person and your communications are being protected, even if the network is not trustworthy. So cryptography allows you to do this just for keeping secrets, but privacy-enhancing technologies let you do the same thing of moving trust from where it is to where it's needed, but for more advanced applications, like being able to perform computation on encrypted data. And as a result, it also changes the power dynamics. So it was said that we were living in sort of 1990s in the golden age of surveillance, where more of our communications were moving online from in-person communications, and so were far easier for anyone to intercept and record. What cryptography and end-to-end encryption in particular has done is try to move back to things that were closer to in-person communication. And the ordinary person using their favorite app can actually stand up to not quite targeted surveillance, but certainly mass surveillance. And I think that's just one example of the power dynamics that are going to be affected by cryptography and privacy-enhancing technologies. And I think that's going to be also one of the reasons why there'll be pushback against developments in that field.
Thank you, Stephen. Definitely a lot of pushback against encryption, especially in common communication applications these days, in European countries especially, which is a surprise, but this is certainly true. Thank you for your comments. Sandeep, what is your view on the subject?
Yeah, so I work on security validation, trying to find security problems in different devices, and much of what I do is both security validation and secure design of various Internet of Things and applications and automotives and similar things. So when from that perspective, security has certainly gotten into the design a lot more. Like when I started security validation let's say 16, 17 years back, this was done by black hat experts. Nowadays, when I'm designing, let's say, an automotive system architecture, the architecture exploration includes things like fuzzing and even certain machine learning-based penetration testing and so on, which is really technology that is coming from security validation originally and being now used, at least without maybe so much understanding, but about where it came from, but by architects to sort of see corner cases. So the way I see it, the biggest impact may not necessarily be in the exact tools that were transformed, but in the mindset from security, which is to identify rather odd corner cases which can cause vulnerabilities, maybe even functional vulnerabilities. Today is probably an interesting day for that, and because of what we have just heard in aircraft, we don't really know what caused it about that aircraft accident, but the identifying corner cases is becoming a very serious problem in functional safety, even in design and performance. And security's, the way I see it, security's biggest role, at least security validation's biggest role in design, more than security itself, has been to develop this idea that we have to look for such things. Maybe not even necessarily from a bad actor, but maybe from environment, maybe from something else. And these tools have certainly been transferred in some limited sense to achieve these things. The challenge, though, is with this, in my domain, as in like putting on my Internet of Things and automotive hats, and we are probably going to have longer discussion on this, is security validation or even security design to the extent that we are thinking in terms of architecture is often required to be used, and in some cases even designed by people who do not have a whole lot of awareness of this thing. As in, how exactly does it perform? What exactly is the challenge? They try to use the tool. If it doesn't find, so with the security validation's biggest problem today is that we cannot identify the quality of security that we have achieved after this. Like, what is it how can I say that this thing is secure? What does it even mean? In fact, for us, we know that it doesn't mean anything. There is nothing called secure. There is security always against some things. And when you start doing that to a person who does not really understand security and wants to transfer these tools, oh, okay, so you cannot really say it's secure, but you want me to use it. So what's the point? And that mindset, awareness change, that kind of thing is what I am seeing as the biggest challenge in a more pervasive adoption of security tools or even security infrastructure in various domains.
Yeah, it's impossible to disagree with it. Let me probe on this a little. One thing I think that we all observe is that there is more funding in different ways, more glory in breaking things. Even when breaking something does not really mean that it is a serious attack, a serious practical attack. A lot more attention is paid for things like that, a lot more funding from companies and from funding agencies goes to this. So for you as a with your focus on validation, how do you think we can move the focus a little bit on building secure things, better validation than breaking things? What can be done?
That is really a challenge. And the problem is that it's very easy to see a security problem when there is one. It's not easy to see when there is no problem or the system has been designed well. Then it seems like an add-on. As in, security is not something we sell. We sell a thermostat, we sell a car. And when somebody buys a car, the mindset is, I want a car with like high speed and good acceleration, maybe good maintenance and all that. But a car which cannot be hacked. I have my professional job to hack BMW vehicles at one point, and nothing against BMW itself. I could have hacked any other car, and that's because it's pretty easy to hack. But I challenge every one of these panelists today, all of you. If your car starts malfunctioning on the road, are you going to ever think that it has been hacked? I am going to say with about 99% confidence that you would not. This is true of most other devices. So I think there is this question of awareness that security is actually a feature that needs to be incorporated, and not because somebody, some magician in some way has shown that it can be hacked, but it's really a reality. And this has not happened. This has not even happened in companies. As in, when I worked with various consumer electronics or automotive systems, they want somebody to certify it secure without really knowing what that means. They want somebody to say, I am responsible for security and this is secure. But what that is means, what is the vulnerability, what is really this is saying is unclear. So two things. One is we have to have the awareness. Second, when it is secure, we have to have a quantifiable understanding metric to sort of specify what exactly it means for something to be so. Today, it's a very nuanced answer. You ask me, is my car secure? I will give a very complicated 1 hour answer, which would make no sense to somebody who is just driving the car. We have to have a better way to answer such questions.
Yeah. Or you could give a substitute answer. For instance, it was certified, therefore it is secure. As one of the authors of the European certification system said privately, this is like hiding behind the glass. Well, everyone understands it, but it provides a way to make a positive statement. One thing that Elisa said really resonated with me, that there are security protections, more security protections implemented that would have a positive impact than the system configurations that are conducive of the optimal behavior of the systems. How can you reconcile the availability of features and the selection of features, because not all of them can be put in place to be implemented for the best impact?
Yeah, again, so this is what I see as a problem of managing security. So a classical example could be, suppose you have a sophisticated firewalls, then you need to provide the proper rules. How do you come? And that's where there are a lot of problems when you get the security attacks. If you look, a lot of them are due because of not following good security practices. But the question is that managing security is very expensive, and we could talk a long time. So that's where I think we need a lot of research to streamline those processes. And by the way, about privacy, I have talked to people who do a lot of user studies. They say people like privacy, but they find managing privacy very difficult, cumbersome, and complicated. Okay. But I want to go back and comment on what Sandeep said actually briefly, because I agree. People ask, can you tell me the system? For example, in machine learning, everyone would like to quantify security with a number so they can apply reinforcement learning, for example. But my view is the following, though, that we cannot say a system is secure, but we can provide more specific assurances. For example, in the case of software, I cannot tell you the software is secure, but I can tell you the software has been verified not to have memory bugs, because this is achievable. On the other hand, software may have a lot of logical mistakes. For example, incorrect security controls. For example, incorrect validation of certificate. So basically, you need to do a lot of different verification, apply different techniques, and then I can say, okay, I can tell you that this software manages certificates correctly. We have examples where we found that was not the case. So you have to understand that you need to come up with specialized techniques for different types of security category or bugs, let's say. Fuzzing, by the way, wouldn't cover a lot of things. I don't know why people think that fuzzing is magic. It doesn't find the logical vulnerability, mainly memory bugs, to be honest. That is something that we could achieve, but we needed to be systematic in this process.
Yeah, being systematic in this area is certainly also a tremendous effort, but it's more possible than boiling the ocean to finding all potential areas of concern. So it's impossible to disagree with this. I have worked in the area of PAFs for, 7-8 years. So, so familiar with the area. What did strike me because of the nature of the main project I had there was the difference between the PAF simulations in FPGA and what happened when we implemented them thanks to the European Commission funding in Silicon. So do you think, Dominic, in general, there are significant differences between implementation and simulation, and how could they be overcome in areas like PAFs and generic hardware?
That's a great question. So I don't know if you're following the SRC Smart USA manufacturing facility. Well, it is an initiative really focused on digital twinning in semiconductors, and I think that's an area where we can do a lot to improve, the security and performance of circuits in general. But in PUFs in particular, now that you're getting real-time updates, from the hardware, from a physical piece of hardware, and sending it to a digital twin, you could use that feedback to actually improve the PUF based on the actual silicon. And this could be done, for different processes, and maybe some of the things you learn from one process do translate while others don't translate, but you're still learning from this digital twin methodology. So that's an area where I think I see a lot of innovation and potential.
Right. And in my experience, digital twins provided good feedback for complex problems that had a lot of integration components to them at the boundaries of different frameworks. So that is probably the future, at least for the few next years to come. I think something that Elisa said, I would like Stephen to comment on it, because it's very close to the topic that you are pursuing. Elisa said that people like privacy, but it's very difficult for everyone to manage the trade-offs associated with even managing individual privacy, let alone collective privacy. Now that we have this significant resistance to the easiest way to achieve privacy through, for instance, end-to-end encryption, how could more attention to trade-offs associated with individual privacy protections help the situation?
So the ideal world is where you don't have to make trade-offs, and sometimes advances in technology allow that to take place. So a lot of the focus for Signal protocol and WhatsApp was on the strong level of encryption that they offered, and that was indeed good. But I think what made it even better was the transparent key management. So you don't need to do anything before your encryption is enabled, and that's quite a contrast to the technologies that came before it, like with PGP in email. So I think one way that technologies can be moved out of very special areas and then be generally used is through a focus on usability. One reason is that non-security experts are less forgiving for poor usability. The people who really have secrets to keep are willing to tolerate somewhat clunky applications, But if you're just going about your daily business, then you want it to work smoothly, and that's where things like Signal and WhatsApp have succeeded. And then the other challenging aspect of usability is trying to understand the mental model for how people think about security or privacy or whatever you're trying to achieve, and then make sure the technology and the way the technology is described is adapted to that mental model. And that might be through education and informing people how the technology works. But I think the better thing is to find out the appropriate mental model that people already think, and then make sure the technology satisfies it. So the way to deal with the difficulty of managing privacy is to make sure that people don't need to manage privacy, and that should be the goal. If that is not possible, or you've gone as far as you can along that route, then you can start making trade-offs. But hopefully that is not going to be necessary.
But can I make a quick comment? So basically, in my view, all encryption techniques, they assure secrecy, okay? Secrecy is one thing. Privacy is even more. So you need the secrecy to have a privacy, but privacy from the end user has things like privacy preferences. For example, if you want to be anonymous, which is even different, you will need, for example, to use a different browser. You may need to use a Tor in your communication. You know, if you look even at the mobile environment, you will need to have security, so many layers there. It's not just enough to encrypt, okay? Because the fact that you encrypt by somebody can see that you are communicating with somebody else, this already leaks information. So it's more complicated, and privacy again has to do with individual preferences as well. So people somehow equate secrecy with privacy, and in my view, those are a bit different. Okay, that's the remark I wanted to make.
Mm. Yeah, I think metadata protection is particularly challenging, and also it's normally accepted now that end-to-end encryption is probably a good thing, although it's certainly controversial. But when it comes to metadata protection, there's a harder battle that needs to be fought on that. There's a lot of resistance, not just from the national security side, but a lot of it comes from the business model of the internet is based around advertising, and hiding metadata makes life harder for advertisers, and that's why you're not seeing these solutions available by default. It's only in particular browsers, like Tor browser, as you mentioned.
Yeah, very true. I think about a decade ago, Angela Sass' work demonstrated that if you spend more than 10% of your effort on support for privacy and security, you are not going to continue supporting this functionality, and will just find a way to go around it or ignore it. I think maybe the number of 10% is not overly precise, but it's to some extent a ballpark. I think traveling between, the US and Europe, I could see the different types of efforts that it takes to maintain elementary privacy. In the US, most of the time it's opaque. It's not clear where your cookies are collected, well, in which way, what data are collected. In Europe, in order to score out, in order to disallow the use of your personal data, you frequently have to go through a choice that takes about 3 minutes for each transaction to complete, which is not practical. I am not sure which is practically better. One is probably a little bit more transparent, but just as little practical as the US variety. I don't know what the solution to this is, but I thank you for the excellent comments on this topic and the topic of trade-offs. There is a lot of interest in the use of artificial intelligence in everything, including security, including privacy. I have observed the use of, for instance, agents, AI agents in common threat management applications. They certainly make things faster. They also make things much less precise, which in security is a significant issue. Those accuracy metrics could be improved, but it will take a long time to do so, and it will probably be because of the offensive mechanisms so easy to proliferate, it probably will be an uphill battle. How do you think artificial intelligence can help in at least reducing the trade-offs for both users and system maintainers in privacy, security, and trust? Do you think it will be helpful? In which way and to what extent? Who would like to comment on this?
I can maybe do a very quick comment, and first on some of the things I've observed on AI. AI, of course, has a lot of advantage particularly so far as validation goes, because it can find a lot of data and maybe identify things which are difficult for the human to directly consider, just because it analyzes so many things so fast. And I've seen AI being used very well in security validation, specifically for that reason. The challenge that I've been seeing with AI a whole lot is it's opaque in terms of explainability. I know there is a lot of work going on in explaining AI, explainability of AI, but when AI says there is a vulnerability, there is something, there is sometimes it often is not very clear why, and it's often not clear for a domain expert to understand why AI is recommending one way or the other. I'll give you one example from a practical situation I have seen. This is not exactly on security, but similar things appear on security. So there are these automated what are called learning-enabled agents in aircrafts, where that recommend, they based on various sensory data, recommend the pilot to do one way or the other, and the pilot can override it. But the pilot, it's not required, but it's just recommendations. And these are being proliferating a whole lot. So one scenario that I was actually shown is one AI agent suggested that you should go down. The other AI agent said that you should go up, climb up during mid-flight. And in fact, both agents were actually correct. The problem was that there was a big blob of cloud, and one was suggesting one way, the other was suggesting the other way. The pilot, however, got confused with these two agents and did exactly the average of the two, which is go straight through, which was the worst thing that he could have done. He could have done that one way or the other. And this is a specific scenario on an experimental platform. So it's not like it's but what I'm saying is that similar things appear when AI gives recommendations which are not quite understandable. So the mitigations are sometimes not clear. So understanding AI and understanding what it's saying and why it is saying this, that seems to be a big challenge, and it's becoming more and more complex because the AI is doing a very, very complex decisions at certain times. So I think we need a lot more research on explainability of AI is probably my bottom line.
Yeah, it's impossible to disagree with it. I think in your area, validation, there are tremendous prospects for AI, but also significant dangers. Like you, it probably would take more time to have to explain a relevant example. But something that could be used as an illustration. A couple of weeks ago, I was asked to create a couple of slides on the proportion of women in STEM. And I decided I'll just ask AI. AI produced half a page with what appeared to be plausible ballpark numbers, and gave me 8 references. Of those 8 references, 7 were made up. So the text itself was not ideal, but it was maybe 60% accurate. That was not true about the references. That was a topic that did not require considerable precision. I had to redo it by hand, but anyway. But if you are talking about detection of threats, you cannot afford this type of
Yes.
Accuracy. So how do you deal with those potential concerns? Anyone wants to comment on this?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. So I would like to say that in a way, I believe that we need to, because people are used to this general AI model, that they know everything. But I think we need also to develop a foundation model specialized in certain domains. Okay, and they must have certain properties. For example, explainability, okay? And this is very important because the foundation models are supposed to use as the base, the initial model, then you can fine tune to specific domains. And I believe that this would help a lot because then those models can be vetted by specialists, tested in all those scenarios, especially for safety critical application. This will be critical, okay? Because, and that's, I think, it will be really important because otherwise, if you just ask ChatGPT, of course, but Dominic has, I think, raised his hand.
Excellent comment. Thank you, Elisa. Dominic.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to add 2 points to that. And it's the fact that, first of all, we need to make sure even that the models themselves are coming from reputable sources, right? Even if we have a baseline model. So, bill of materials is becoming a big deal in software. It's also becoming a big deal in AI. And then the other thing I want to say is, of course, the training data itself has to come from a secure source. So you also sort of need a bill of materials or a validation for the data that's being used to train these, especially when they're using critical systems, as Lisa mentioned.
And there is an understanding, that general models are good for some type of general queries, but not for everything. Companies like here look at specific domain-based models, and there are smaller companies that also look at mission-critical implementations. But there is a lot more work to be done. Sandeep, what is your view on this?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention about this, the use of this LLMs and all that, is a lot of the work that is happening today with using LLMs in various domains, including security, is primarily prompt engineering. So you give the right prompt, you are probably going to get the result that suits you. And I have actually tried that for various LLMs myself, and my students have done so. And this is actually common knowledge that if you ask a question in a way that it like most of the common LLMs, at least, if they understand what kind of answer you are looking for, they would bias your answer towards you. And that, so coming back, that foundational model is certainly particularly required so that we can get something like an objective thing from AI that we can trust. I don't know how to do that. But also, it's also the case that people have to understand what exactly it gives, and comes back to this question, well, don't trust ChatGPT so much is the point. But I have seen certainly people, even students writing academic papers, to be honest, trusting what ChatGPT is saying. Oh, this is something that I found in ChatGPT. And did you check? Did you not check? Or what do you do? And sometimes the problem is also that it gives too much information in a very plausibly sounding way that makes somebody think that you don't have to double check, and that probably requires more knowledge and awareness of of its limitations.
Yeah, this is very true. There is a whole class of AI driven applications where they insert nonsense sentences in an answer to prevent scientists and employees from copying everything verbatim, so that it could be easily recognized and tagged. Uh, Definitely a problem. Stephen?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence has had huge impacts in a lot of fields. I think surprisingly, it's had relatively little effect in the security field compared to others, at least. And I think one of the reasons is that security is all about defending against every possible attack. It's not just suitable to come up with one solution because the attacker will find a way around it. But I think where it has shown some benefit is security testing. So artificial intelligence and large language model chatbots have been quite good at participating in capture the flag competitions and identifying vulnerabilities. So they won't give you any assurance that you've identified all the problems, but if one of these large language models cannot find any flaws in your system, then that gives you some assurance that the easy to find flaws are not being there. I think it'll be a longer wait before we start getting them to give high levels of assurance, but the speed of improvement in large language models is incredible. So I think we could expect some improvements eventually.
I think so too. But the way to circumvent their accuracy and actionability will improve also. So it will continue to be difficult, but I'm sure it will improve. Since the security technology space has become so complicated from the accumulation of knowledge, from the general complexity, from a lot of other things. How do you think we should train the new generation of security technologists? This is something that you do every day. Should there be any changes? What are your thoughts, Dominic? What do you think?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I definitely see the motivation for it is, what's on the horizon. A lot of sticks coming out of government to really promote best practices like the EU Cyber Resilience Act, CESA Secure by Design initiative. This is very challenging because a lot of engineers and developers are used to optimizing for performance, cost, and usability, not security and privacy. Those are afterthoughts. So there's a steep learning curve involved, and we do need to change things. It's also very multidisciplinary in nature. So one thing that I've been looking at recently, which I'm very excited about, at least for engineers, is the Cyber-Informed Engineering Initiative that's developed by the Department of Energy. So they've broken down a set of principles, 12 principles that from the outset of engineering education, you can start training engineers to learn to identify and address risks in a more holistic way. And the real strength of this framework is that it doesn't expect every engineer to be a cybersecurity expert, which is not going to happen because that's really in the domain of computer science. So instead, the CIE empowers engineers to really understand the consequences of cyber attacks on systems, usually cyber physical, but I'm also starting to apply this to hardware systems as well. And then to select and advocate for appropriate engineered controls to address those risks. So you assume the attacker has gotten in through cyber secure means. Now that they've gotten in, how do you handle it? So to some extent, we have to sort of leverage the work in safety and reliability that's been there in the past. That doesn't necessarily directly apply because that's applied to more to random events rather than intelligent security attacks. But this is the type of mindset that we have to reinforce in our engineers from the ground up. And this will help us definitely meet these new legislative expectations and create these secure and trustworthy systems.
It's impossible to disagree with it. Thank you. Sandeep, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to
Right.
just wanted to add a couple of points. One of them is you don't learn security by hearing security. That's my personal experience and many others. So you learn security, particularly in this area of like cyber physical systems and Internet of Things and devices, by doing security, which means that you need to learn how to, like in a practical sense, how to break into a system, how exactly a hacker works, and then you can figure out how to mitigate it. But the challenge there is that we don't have good platforms to do so. As in, maybe for hardware we can do something, but let's say taking my domain, automotive security. What do I do to help somebody understand how to hack a car? Can I give them a car? Obviously not. Like, apart the expense aside, it's a safety question. And also it will not teach them, because when I hack a car, I have learned enough to figure out from very telltale signs how to proceed. The first hack never succeeds. So we need what might be called exploration platforms, which somebody can use to safely, but in a much streamlined way, learn through hands-on exercises what really security is for these kinds of devices. And whether maybe digital twins are going to help, maybe something digital twins hybrid with some other cyber physical platforms, maybe with immersive technologies. But the point is that we are not really putting that much work on how to develop platforms that are, what would be the research question in developing platforms that can help somebody understand hacking as opposed to doing the hacking or developing mitigations. And that probably is a critical requirement, at least in the space that I see.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So some kind of test bed for exploration. Yeah, it would be difficult to build, but certainly worth it. Stephen, what are your views?
Yeah, I think when it comes to education, still the foundations are still roughly unchanged. In some respects, things have moved on dramatically. So there's new technologies, cryptography can do a lot more, artificial intelligence, of course. But there's people who've been in the security industry, left for 20 years, come back, and it's still the same challenges. You've got threat modeling, you've got security properties, you've got understanding the software, bugs, web applications. So yes, some things should be changed, but that shouldn't be at the cost of removing the foundations, because it's through the foundations that people can understand the new technologies. If it's just the buzzwords of today that get included in education, then that will be great now, but in 5-10 years time, someone who only knows the buzzwords will be lost, but someone who's got a deep understanding of the foundations will be able to pick up whatever is coming next.
Absolutely, removing foundations, although foundations evolve also, but removing foundations is not a good idea in any subject. That would be a little bit akin of the No Mathematics initiative in California schools that luckily did not go anywhere. Elisa, would you like to comment on this as well?
Yeah, so my point of view is very simple. I agree with Steven that we need a good foundations. Then I have a lot of emphasis on the processes. For me, security means preparing your system to withstand attacks. But understanding that no defense is perfect, so you have to monitor everything, be very smart, and there machine learning can help a lot. Finally, when you see anomalies, you need to understand quickly. And then you have to, and I agree with Dominic, at that point you have a problem. And then you have to manage the problem and make sure your system can continue working. In many cases, you cannot stop or isolate your system, which means at the end, the resilience is important. And as to be, at the end, the cause is important, but at the moment, you need it, can be a natural phenomena, can be an attack, but you need to deal with that. After, you can do forensics and understand where you had the problem. With those processes in place, and you need to know which are your security goals. Are you trying to protect the data from being stolen, which is different from sabotage of a critical infrastructure? That also drives your security processes. Because if you don't have this in place, then you don't know what you're doing. In my view, that's.
It's impossible to disagree with this. You need to understand the objective.
It's common sense. Yeah.
The problem. Yeah. Thank you, Elisa. And the time has come for very brief concluding remarks. Looking into the future, how do you see this relationship between security and general technologies will reveal itself? And are you positive about the progress of security technologies, let's say in the next 5 years? And we'll go in reverse alphabetical order this time. Sandeep, what are your thoughts?
So, are my outlooks positive or negative is a difficult statement. I would just say somewhat positive, but somewhat negative as well. And I want to sort of just explain that the negative component to an extent, which is that we have to understand the value of security from a very consumer user perspective, not as security experts. We, of course, love security, and we would say security is the center. But there is no security if there is no product, and so we have to understand how we can properly trade off security with all the other things, and based on that, decide how much security really can we do. And that brings me back to this thing: what is how much security and what it means? And generally, we would give a nuanced, very technical answer, which is not really helpful to sort of figure out what that means to that specific product, not outside technology. So we have to somehow make security more explainable in order for it to be adopted and for it to become a feature, not an add-on, in terms of whether the product should be marketable or not.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's what I would say. Partly positive, partly negative, and security is always specific. Stephen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's again hard to say whether I'm positive or negative. I think we're in some ways quite a dangerous time when there are a lot of powerful interests who are trying to make things less secure. There is the community that are resisting privacy technologies because it interferes with their business model. And then there's also parts of the national security infrastructure that are trying to go back to the bad old days before we had end-to-end encryption. So I think there are going to be some challenges resisting some of these powerful interests. But if that can be done, then there's certainly many opportunities for improvement. And yeah, explainability is definitely part of that, and more generally a focus on usability and a focus not just on the trade-offs, but how we can avoid making trade-offs through better technology and better explainability of technology.
Thank you. Avoiding trade-offs is an ideal goal. I wish everyone had put it in front of themselves. Thank you, Stephen. Dominic, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say my outlook is also a bit balanced. On the positive side, I think security is becoming less of an afterthought. I think that's good. On the other hand, we have these new threats, like we brought up about, we were talking about using AI more for the benefit of security, but it could clearly be used by attackers as well. That's something we definitely have to worry about. And the whole idea of keeping hardware and software secure by default, while still ensuring transparency, updatability, and all these kinds of things, so that new vulnerabilities can be mitigated, is going to be an ongoing balancing act. So I see it being tricky, but generally positive, but also generally negative.
Yeah, well, security has always been like that. It was always been a dangerous time. The first time I heard this phrase was in 1995 when I was a student. It has always been dangerous. That security is not an afterthought is a positive, but there are a lot of negatives due to other considerations. Thank you, Dominic. Elisa.
Yeah, very, very quickly. I am positive in a way because I have, followed this area for 40 years. So I know how we were 40 years ago, and we have done immense progresses. So I think we will continue to make progresses. There is awareness. The real issue will be our systems are becoming increasingly more complex. So I work in cellular networks, now being integrated with non-terrestrial network. You have these monster systems. And with the AI agent, they will be so interconnected. And complexity is a problem for security. And that's what I can say, but we will figure it out, processes and method to deal with that.
I'm sure we'll figure it out. And it's great to have a person who is definitely positive. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elisa. Thank you very much to all the distinguished panelists. You certainly gave me and the listeners and the future listeners a lot of food for thought. I very much appreciate your participation and sharing your insights. Thank you. And now, David, would you please close this webinar?
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire, and thank you all four of you for your contributions and speaking so frankly about your experiences, which are extremely valuable. As I said earlier, we will share a recording of this session and a report summary within a few days, which I encourage you to distribute to friends and family and colleagues. Our next webinar is going to be in 2 weeks' time, which is on security by design with Steve Purser in the chair. So with that, many thanks again to Claire and to Elisa, Dominic, Sandeep with an I, and Stephen for participating, and have a good rest of